Chapter 2 is coming from Miss Roxy and myself. She won't leave me alone ever since I've been home. So, here she is. She might move away. She might not. Here we go. Chapter 2 is called Harlem. Harlem is the first place called home that I can remember. It was a magical place, alive with music that spilled onto the busy streets from the tenement windows, and full of colors and smells that filled my senses and made my heart beat faster. The earliest memory I have is of a woman who picked me up on a Sunday morning to take me to Sunday school. She would have 5 to 10 children with her when she rang our bell on 126th Street, and we would go through the streets holding hands and singing Jesus Loves Me on our way to Abyssinian Baptist. I remember being comforted by the fact that Jesus, whom I didn't even know, thought so much of me. After church, we would be brought home, again holding hands and singing our way through the streets of Harlem. What life was about for me in those early years was being with the woman I was learning to call Mama. When Florence Dean was home, I would follow her from room to room as she cleaned, talking about anything that came to mind, knowing that she would always listen. Any house in which she lived was kept spotless. Mama had a time to sweep the floors and time to mop them. There was a time to wash the clothes and a time to iron them, fold them, and put them away. Each holiday meant taking all the dishes down from the shelves, even the ones we never used, and carefully washing and drying them, as well as the windows of the dish cabinet. Mama didn't work outside the house when I first arrived in New York, but that was changed from time to time. I remember that when I was 4, a woman in the building was taken on as my caretaker during the days when Mama worked. Mama did what she called day's work, meaning that she cleaned out other people's apartments and was paid by the day. The woman who took care of me gave that chore to her children, who delighted in torturing me by hiding in the closet and making believe they were ghosts. I was a baller, screaming in fear at all the appropriate moments, which delighted them. I learned how mindlessly cruel some children could be. We were far away from credit cards in those days, and the equivalent was an account at the corner grocery. Mama, who was determined that I should never be hungry, arranged with the grocer to give me food if I was hungry and to put it on her account. What I actually did when I had the chance was buy penny squares of chocolate. Soon, every kid on the block knew that I could get free chocolates. One weekend, both the grocer and I got good talking to, and my account came to a crashing end. What I loved most about Harlem, though, was the music. There were radios everywhere, and little girls jumped double dutch to Duke Ellington, Cab Calloway, and Glenn Miller. My sisters, Jerry and Viola, danced with me in the house. But the girls in the street wouldn't dance with me, so I danced by myself. I had taught myself a little dance that I called the boogie. My dancing was amusing enough for people to throw pennies to me when I danced. When I had enough pennies, I would scoop them up and run to the grocer's to buy my favorite colored icy pops. I could keep this up for hours and loved it until one day I had a stomachache and went home crying. When Mama got home from work, she put me on the toilet and sat on the edge of the bathtub to comfort me. Within minutes, I was being snatched up and rushed to Knickerbocker Hospital. Mama had reasoned that the red liquid passing through my intestines had to be blood. At the hospital, the doctors were equally alarmed until a few tests confirmed I had consumed so many ice pops that the food coloring was going straight through. It was clear I needed more supervision during the day, and Mama found another babysitter who took care of a number of children. This woman had playground apparatus in her backyard, which I liked a lot. I was told not to play on the climbing bars, but I tried them anyways. Getting to the top was easy enough and not nearly as exciting as falling off head first onto the cement below. I've always had a big head, and I must have looked a sight that night, with bandages covering half my face, when Mama picked me up. She decided to stay home to take care of me for a while. My 2 sisters were already in their teens and had the job of being young ladies. I was the baby of the family and the only boy that got most of the attention, which I enjoyed. I claimed Mama for my own and was jealous of any attention she paid to her daughters. When Jerry received the fancy watch as a present, I was annoyed. Jerry hadn't changed, and so I thought it was the watch that made her special. Can I have... One second. Can I have a nickel? I asked Mama. A week had passed since Jerry had received the watch, and Mama, her forehead dripping sweat, was doing the wash in a tub of scalding water, pushing the sheets down into the hot liquid with a stick. Mama shook her head. Can I have a nickel? I asked again, wanting her to stop the washing and perhaps take me to the corner store for an icy pop. Later, Walter, she said. I'm busy now. Go play. I'll break Jerry's watch, I said. Boy, go into the living room and play, she said sternly. The watch didn't break right away. I hit it with my shoe, and nothing happened. Then I hit it with my father's shoe. It still didn't break. Then I hit it with with both shoes as hard as I could until I saw a crack in the curved crystal. This I took proudly to Mama. A spanking is a spanking is a spanking. Mom was strong enough to hold me by the corner of my shirt at the shoulder and lift me so that I could not get a firm footing on the ground. Then, still sweating from her efforts at washing the sheets, she laced into me with a folded belt that, from time to time, became the strap. Of course, she could have prevented the watch from being broken if she had only believed me when I told her that I was going to break it. Instead, she covered my legs and hands with welts with the strap. When Jerry came home from work, she wasn't pleased either. I needed discipline, but my adoptive father, Herbert Jean, hated to see me crying. So the next time Mom worked outside the house, I was sent to my Aunt Nancy, my father's sister, who lived downtown in New York. Division Street on New York's Lower East Side was as wonderful to me as Harlem. There were few black people in the area, but at my age, which was probably 5, I was not really aware of racial differences. What was on Division Street was Aunt Nancy, her husband, whom we all called Mr. Harrison, the bakery she operated, push carts, a matzo factory, and Jewish boys. Mama would take me to Aunt Nancy's on a Sunday night and pick me up the following Friday. Aunt Nancy was as fat as she was tall. She was the biggest woman I'd ever seen in my life, and exactly the same color brown as my father. I liked her because she was a friendly woman, but I absolutely hated the idea that she would take naps in the middle of the day. What's more, she would insist that I take naps with her, which I thought was a terrible thing to do. I never wanted to go to sleep, not even at night when it was dark. Certainly I didn't want to go to sleep in the middle of the day. Still, every afternoon she would come upstairs from the bakery and head for the bed. In Aunt Nancy's living room was a cast-iron alligator ashtray that was nearly as tall as I was. It had glass eyes and hard cast-iron scales down its back. More than once I thought I saw one of its glass eyes look in my direction. It was not my favorite object. Aunt Nancy spent most of the day working in the bakery. In the afternoons, I was allowed to play in front of the store. That's where I met the boys who told me we could beat up some of the Jewish boys. The Jewish boys always came downstairs with their mothers. They wore their hair long on the side and sometimes wore shirts that seemed too big. If you hit them, they wouldn't hit back, but would run to their mothers. I followed the example of some of the bigger boys and hit the ones who wouldn't hit back. The problem was, of course, that if you chased them around the corner where their mothers couldn't see them, they would fight back. After a while, a Jewish boy would stand near the corner, hoping that one of us would make the mistake of chasing him to a position where he could send his fist into an unsuspecting nose. If the men who worked in the matzo factory saw us, they sometimes would separate us and give everyone hot-baked matzos. Wonderful. Mama didn't always have to work outside the house. The greatest time I ever spent in my life was when she was home. During the day, we would walk down the south side of 125th Street to the Smillen Brothers produce store or to Bloomstein's, maybe, the largest store on 125th Street. The street was always busy, and black and white shoppers stopped in their shoe stores and bought Charlotte Russes to eat as they walked. We would walk east and then return on the north side of the street. The north side of the street had Herbert's Diamonds, a large jewelry store, and the Better Theaters. First, we would stop at the RKO, Alhambra, to see what was playing, then Lowe's. Sometimes Mama would stop and look at the pictures outside the Apollo Theater. Sometimes, for a special treat, we would stop in on the Penny Arcade. On rare occasions, we would go all the way over to the east side, to the market stalls under the elevated railroad tracks. If we didn't go out, we would listen to her soap operas on the radio. Helen Trent was her favorite. Mama liked to read true romance magazines and would let me sit on her lap as she would read aloud. The sound of Mama's voice in our sun-drenched Harlem kitchen was like a special kind of music, meant for me only. It was almost a secret language, one that only the two of us understood. I don't think she ever used that special voice with my sisters or my father. She was small, barely over 5 feet tall, and I was soon too big to sit on her lap. She would sit at the kitchen table, and I would sit on a chair with wooden arms and a fabric body that I loved, and listen to the sound of her voice as she half read, half acted out the stories of lost loves and sudden passions. I think she liked talking to me. She could tell me things I wouldn't tell other people. Once, she's told me that she liked to yodel and that she had done so as a child. She yodeled for me, and I thought it was marvelous. When I told my father, he laughed, and she wouldn't yodel for him. Sometimes she would ask me simple questions like, what did I think the weather would be the next day, and stop whatever she was doing to wait for an answer. I would have the words in my head and would try to get them as quickly as I could, putting them in as good as order as I could. Why don't you just marry Mama, my sister Viola complained. You always have something to say to her. I asked Mama about that later, and she said no, she already had a husband, Herbert. Years later, when I had learned to use those words better, I lost my ability to speak so freely with Mama. I didn't want to learn to read so much as I wanted to be like Mama. I like words and talking, and I wanted to be able to look at the magazines and tell her the stories as she did for me. I told her that I wanted to do this, and she arranged our chairs so that we were sitting side by side in the kitchen, with her pointing out the words as she read them. Slowly, with Ma's help, I learned to read. Before long, I could read well enough to read to Mama as she did the housework. What we had to read were Mama's true romance magazines and a few classic comics. I didn't understand much of what I was reading, but I was on my way. Think about Walter's relationship with his mom and how that might contribute to the rest of the story. And what else might be important? His time in New York, perhaps with his aunt, and his relationship with the boys on the street. Think about those things, and then I'll see you next time. Thank you for listening.